I'm Sean Kennedy, and this is Backstage at the Enharmonic. Today's episode of Backstage at the Enharmonic features Jim Riley, drummer and bandleader for the multi-platinum group Rascal Flatts. Jim is also an avid teacher and is currently an adjunct professor of drumset studies at Belmont University. Throughout today's interview, Jim talks about his early influences, his upbringing, and why he chose the Nashville scene in the mid-90s. Jim also stresses how important it is to set up a drum set correctly, and he discusses the ergonomics of how he sets up his drum set to deliver the music he needs to play. He also mentions some very memorable performances and meaningful experiences that he's had throughout his career. And please forgive my dog at the beginning of the interview. There's a couple squeaks and jingles under some of the interview. He was in my studio when I was recording this, and I didn't realize the mic was picking him up. However, my dog's name is Kenny Rogers, so it all seems to make sense. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Backstage at the Enharmonic. Thanks, Jim, for coming to Backstage at the Enharmonic. I'm very excited to talk to you and ask you some questions. And for the listeners that are out there, my money would be that every single person that's going to listen to this has heard you play drums more than once in their life. But in case they don't know who Jim is, could you just give us a quick synopsis of yourself for the listeners that might not be familiar with you?
Yeah, so from the year 2000 to 2020, I was a drummer, musical director, band leader for the group Rascal Flatts. During that time, obviously had opportunity to, play a bunch of incredible live shows, do some album work, do some movie work, to do some all sorts of stuff. That's really interesting opportunities. And currently, I'm sure we'll get into it, but Rascal Flatts has been broken up since 2020. So currently, I'm actually playing with lead singer Gary LeVox of Rascal Flatts, and I'm actually also doing some dates with Jay DeMarcus. He's got a side project called Generation Radio, so I'm doing some gigs with him, on the side. So I'm actually playing with two of my three Rascal Flatts bosses, each in the next month. So
awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. So a lot of students kind of check out my podcast, high school, middle school, going into college and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So maybe you could just go back a bit in the time machine, the Jim Riley time machine. When you were in middle school and high school, or even before, what inspired you to play drums? What was it that attracted you to drums first?
I can remember it very, very, very clearly. I knew that I wanted to be a musician since before I was a musician. I saw an ad for the band Kiss. I saw an ad on TV for Kiss Alive 2, I think. And I've seen the commercial since then, and it showed Peter Criss's drum set, and it was kind of rising up in the air, this ever-expanding drum riser. And he was just absolutely surrounded with drums. And it was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I'm like, that is the job that I want. And that was probably like kindergarten, first grade. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. So by the time I was in the fourth grade, I had already taken some guitar lessons, but I didn't really connect with the instrument that much. I think mostly because I wanted to play it left-handed and no one would teach me left-handed. So I lost interest in guitar. Fourth grade, I asked my parents to let me play drums at school. They said no. Fifth grade, I asked them if I could play drums. They said no. Finally, sixth grade, they said, well, whatever's wrong with this kid isn't going to be solved by not letting him play drums. So let's give that a shot. And really what happened was probably the opposite of what they thought, which was that playing music and playing drums was a galvanizing force in my life. Everything, that was happening that was good was surrounding that. It really turned my whole existence around. And so I just started playing drums. I was taking lessons in the 6th grade, learning to read music, played some bells, played some snare drum. I moved through my first teacher pretty fast. I went to another teacher. That teacher suggested that I take lessons with Alan Dawson and with Arthur Press with the Boston Symphony. So I took some lessons with those guys in high school, and ended up going to college. I went to the University of North Texas, which was a great experience. So maybe we'll get into a little bit of that.
Fantastic. So mom and dad said no originally. Did mom and dad play any instruments?
They did not. They did not. Completely, very much musical enthusiasts. Loved music. We always listened to music. Mom was listening to Sinatra. Dad was listening to the Rolling Stones. And my mom was, listening to a little bit of Bee Gees. Dad was listening to Harry Chapin and Stevie Wonder. And he was somewhere between folk and rock and funk. And mom was somewhere between, jazz singers and, like I said, I listened to a lot of those Bee Gees records and ABBA records and all of that from my mom's side.
And you were up near Boston. Yep. Did you ever get to?
I was born in Boston. I was raised in the suburbs.
Okay. One of my favorite drummers watching coming up on PBS was Fred Buda. I don't know if you ever had a chance to see him live or study with him or anything. Yep.
Met Fred. Saw Fred play with the Boston Pops.
Mm-hmm.
He was great. Yeah. I mean, there was Bob Galati was up there. He's amazing. Alan Dawson up there. There was a lot of really neat drummers that were living in that area, and I got some exposure to them. And then of course, I mean, I literally, as a kid, I mean, I can honestly say, I went to Vic Firth's house when I was in high school.
Wow.
I bought my first tambourine from Neil Grover in his basement.
Incredible.
So yeah, pretty incredible.
So you're in high school, middle school, University of North Texas, and when I think Nashville drummers, you're like right up there at the top now. In those formative years, did you ever think you'd be in Nashville and known as a Nashville studio player?
No.
Okay.
No.
What did you think? Did you think you were going to be in Kiss, or was that your goal? Or
that is literally exactly what I thought.
Okay.
And so what Eric Singer does for a living,
right?
That's what I thought I would be doing. But the truth is, the idea of rock players and rock music playing in stadiums, I had this idea of me playing. I couldn't shake that image of the big stage and being on tour and being behind a crazy, beautiful drum set. And what happened was the world changed in the time from when I was a kid to the time that I was old enough to be, a professional player. The idea of arena rock had kind of gone away in some respects. And that music had been taken over by some different genres. Specifically pop, and then another one starting in the early 90s, there was an incredible rise of country music. So what happened, I mean, I was a kid growing up in Massachusetts. I had very little exposure to country music. The only exposure I really had was Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, and really, to be honest, those were pop stars.
Mm-hmm.
They were absolutely pop stars. So they were country and like country crossover artists. So I didn't have any country music pedigree at all. I had no interest in country music. I mean, I'd played a lot more rock and funk and metal and jazz and so I didn't really have any experience with that. When I went to Texas, I started to get some exposure to country music. And when it got to be around the early 90s, something really interesting happened in music. And that there was the rise of, if I was to say 92, 93, what is that, the rise of music? What was the thing that changed everything in music at that time?
You're asking me?
Yeah. What was the biggest thing in music, 92, 93? What killed Poison's career? What killed Winger's career, Motley Crue's career for a while? It was grunge.
All right.
It was Nirvana. It was Soundgarden. It was Rage Against the Machine. All of that stuff was the stadium rock killers. It was the anti-stadium rock. So that music killed everything. It became the biggest thing in music. And I'm not sure that it was as universally loved as it was by, I loved it. The music industry loved it. But I felt like there was a pushback from the average music listener. Some people really didn't relate to it. So there was an alternative to the alternative. And that is where one of the biggest acts of the early 90s found his rise, and that was Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks became an incredibly, he came the biggest thing in music in the early 90s. He brought along with him Reba McEntire and Alan Jackson and Brooks and Dunn, and then a little bit later Toby Keith, and then Shania Twain came through. So there was this just incredible wave of country music. And so I started to hear the musicianship coming out of Seattle. I started hearing the musicianship coming out of Nashville. And I said, you know what? I feel more like I would fit in Nashville. I was so impressed by the musicianship I was hearing on these country records. Guitar solos that were just blowing my mind, fiddle solos, incredibly solid drumming, great production. And I went, that's just that's the level of musicianship I want to be around. And that was at the first time I realized that I had more of a love affair with music and the idea of being a professional musician than I did any particular genre. Some people, they want to be a jazz musician, or they want to be a funk musician, or they want to be a blues musician, or they want to be a country musician or a rap musician. I always wanted to just be a working musician. So for me, I ended up playing literally all of those things coming up. But I saw an angle coming to Nashville where I was like, you know what? I think someone like me could go there. And the first angle that I saw was, listen, I want to get on the road and I want to play some shows. There's a lot of these session musicians that are playing that are not going on the road with artists. They're looking for a drummer to go out on the road. I could be that guy. So I came to Nashville with that business model. And literally 11 months later, I was on the road with, kind of a big name artist, and I was off to the races.
Incredible. And your undergrad was in music education, correct?
Yep.
Now, were mom and dad supportive of that? And then after you didn't decide to teach, was there any blowback from your family about going on tour?
All of those things, of those things. So my parents were very supportive of the music ed degree. I got the music ed degree. I really quite accidentally landed a job at a great at a great school district outside of Dallas, and it ended up being a very coveted job. But I just sort of right place, right time, walked in, went into the interview, got the job that some other people didn't get. And so for 1 year, I was like the percussion specialist for the Capel Independent School District, which is right next to Irving and Dallas. And so it was a great job. My parents were just over the moon. My mom's like, my son's a teacher, she just thought it was the greatest. And I really enjoyed it because I love teaching. I have an incredible passion for teaching. It's something that, to this day, I do so much of. But I had this other passion, which was probably primary, which was I wanted to be a professional musician on the highest level. So I had to make the tough decision of leaving a job that I thought was really great. My mom was not brokenhearted about it. She was definitely not incredibly happy about it. But I said, you know what? I gotta follow this dream. That led me to bouncing around for a couple years, and then I moved to Nashville in 1997. And I mean, started off incredibly humbly. Lived at a drum shop. When the drum shop closed, I was literally living in my truck. And then I ended up living on Rich Redmond's couch, who'd only been in Nashville for about 2 weeks longer than I had, but he had an apartment. We lived together for about 6 months. And then, I ended up, about a year into it, I ended up landing a pretty big gig. And that afforded me to move out and rent a room with a friend where I had my own space, which was really great.
So I guess you probably already answered it a little bit, but you probably had a lot of doubt and some apprehension as you were getting into this professional thing after you left teaching.
So I'll answer that part in a small piece.
Okay.
I didn't have a lot of doubt.
Okay.
I didn't have a lot of doubt. Maybe I had misplaced confidence, but I felt like this was what I was going to do, and it was just what I was going to do.
Okay. So then the next part of that question, I guess, was there a particular moment where you said, yes, this is going to work? Like, did something specific happen?
Yeah, I felt really early on, like in the process. I mean, I swear, when I was homeless, but I was playing a couple of dates a week, I went, this is going to work. This is going to work. I just need to, I need to figure a couple of things out. Living in my truck is not the way to go here. I got to figure something out. But I felt pretty early on, even the first summer, I got here in March of 2000. By June, July, I was playing with some artists on the road. Now, the business was a little different back then. Country music was really incredibly hot. Labels were very aggressive. They were throwing tons and tons of artists out there, just seeing what would stick. So what would happen was an artist would be thrown out there. They would get on the road. Things would not work out for them. All the musicians would bail out and go to the next thing. And there were 3 different artists I played with that first summer where I was literally mopping up at the end of somebody's short career. But I was like, listen, I'm getting called. I'm meeting people that are doing this. I remember being in a club. I'm like, there's Tim McGraw's drummer. I just met him. I just played a show with Faith Hill's drummer. I'm meeting people. I feel like, things are going to happen. And then 11 months into it, I'm playing a $40 gig. That one might have been a $30 gig. It was 6 to 10 at Legends Corner on Broadway. The bass player was really great. He calls me up. I don't have a phone yet, but I've got a pager, and he leaves me a voicemail and says, "Hey, I think I might have got something for you." So I'm thinking, he's got another gig on Broadway, 10 to 2 somewhere. And he goes, he says, "Listen, I just got the gig with Mark Chestnut, and I think I may have gotten you that gig." And I went, "Oh my gosh, what do I got to do? Who do I got to call? What do I got to?" He's like, "You don't have to do anything." He says, "Just let me know where you're going to be playing sometime in the next week. A couple of the guys in the band just want to come hear you play." So they came out and heard me play, and they talked amongst themselves. There's only 3 of them, and they said, "Yeah, this guy's great." And they gave me, I think it was a tape. I don't think it was a CD. I think it was a tape. And they gave me a set list, and they said, "Yeah, we got rehearsal in, 3 weeks, and then we're playing we're playing a TV show. So my first gig with those guys was up in New York. It was the very first season of The View.
Wow.
And so that was my first gig with Mark, was on live TV.
Incredible.
For network, yeah.
So your drumming chops, of course, were ready to go. The stuff they don't really talk about in school, maybe, or a lot of young players might not think of. Your business acumen, getting up every morning. What other things got you the gig besides just having good chops and listening?
Yeah. So my hands were together. My styles were together. I think something that's really important is understanding that every different genre of music requires your attention, because none of them are as easy as you think they are. One of the biggest mistakes that people make, and I'll call out a certain group here, I'll do it. The jazz players seem to think that playing country and pop is easier than playing jazz, and it's not. It's a completely different discipline that requires a completely different set of skills. There is literally no place to hide in pop music. So your approach has to be darn near perfect. Whereas with jazz, there's room to kind of, maneuver around and make things perfect after the fact. I did something and then I'm going to do it again, and that made the first time pretty awesome. Right. Pop music doesn't allow for that. It's very angular. It's very cut and dry. There's just no place to hide. I think of it like I was giving a clinic for the U.S. Army music program, and I asked a soldier to walk up to a whiteboard, and I said, I want you to draw me as great of a circle as you can. So with his free hand, he draws a circle. I said, listen, I think we can all agree that that's a circle. But upon further examination, it's a little flat over here, comes together kind of funny. It's not close to perfect. In other words, it sounds like it's a simple task, but it's deceivingly difficult to do well. That's the way pop music is. And once you realize that, then you can go, okay, there's a method here. There's something that I need to study. You start to study the greats. The first thing you have to do is respect a genre. If you'll respect it, then you'll study it. If you'll study it, then you can figure out the nuances that everybody else is missing, and then you can become special at it.
Awesome. So who did you study to get acclimated or to become an expert at this genre?
Everybody. I mean, from drummers like Larry London, who were dominating, the 70s and 80s in Nashville, to my friend Eddie Bayers, to Lonnie Wilson, to Chris McHugh, to the people that Evan Hutchings, whose birthday's tomorrow, I just happened to see, who's a young player. I mean, I listen to everybody. Jerry Rowe, who's the son of Dave Rowe, who's a great bass player, friend of mine, plays on a bunch of big records. My friend Rich Redmond. I mean, my friend Seth Rausch, who's played with everyone from Little Big Town to Keith Urban to, he's done he's now playing with Carrie Underwood. But I listen to all of them, and I find certain commonalities there, and I go, what are the things that make these people great? And mostly it's just their clarity of purpose. They understand what their role as a drummer is. Many of those drummers that I just listed, not all of them, but there are several of them, they don't have crazy world-class chops. They just have a really incredible clarity of purpose. They know what to do. They get a great quality of sound, and they know what to play when. They have a really great feel for that. That's the key, the essence of the artistry of being in country music and pop music, which I think are very linked, are very close.
What do you do every day or try to do every day to keep your chops in line and all that type of stuff?
Yeah. So I got a really great piece of advice at a clinic. I heard it more than one time, and so I'll pass it along to all the listeners because it's absolutely true. And that is, when you're young, when you're in middle school, when you're in high school, when you're in college, it's very likely you don't have a spouse. You don't even have a job. Your job is to get great at what you want to try to do. So my advice is practice while you have time, because when you're a professional, you're going to have a lot less time to practice. So I teach constantly. I'm teaching at Belmont University. I'm finishing up my third year there as a professor. I teach here 2 days a week right now. I've done 27 drum camps here, where I have people come in from all over North America and study with me in a small group session here in my studio. I teach online. I still do drum clinics when those things are coming up. I've got a couple of those coming up. So when I'm breaking things down for my students is where I am constantly reevaluating what is important to me as a player. One of the best things about teaching at the college level is it's forced me to really break down concepts and defend my thoughts as to, well, why? Not just what do you do, but why do you do it? And it's been really amazing. And in that process, I'm constantly reevaluating and reassessing what is truly important to me as a professional musician. And I can take those assessments and evaluations and bring them into my my everyday career. When I'm recording down here, which I do a lot, I literally recorded a song for a client a little while ago. I'm actually looking to see if I've heard back from them yet. I'll let you know if I have. Not yet. So yeah, I'm waiting to hear back from that client. But every time I'm playing a song, I'm hearing myself play. I'm able to evaluate what I do. One of the things that my teachers always said, even in a different age where people were recording with the two buttons on the tape machine, they would say, record yourself playing. Well, as a career, part of my career right now is recording here in my studio, as well as in other people's studio and session studios downtown. But most of what I do is here, and there's a lot of people that's the case. There's a lot of players that are playing on big records, and they're doing them at their house now because they can do it. They've got a controlled environment. They've got every drum. It's all mic'd up. It's all ready to go. They don't have to rent a studio because it's already the drummer's studio. So every time I'm playing a song, I'm able to listen back and evaluate what I'm hearing and ask myself a very simple question. Would I buy that performance? Do I buy it? Would I literally pay money for that performance? And if I listen to it and I go, yeah, that sounds like something I would listen to. That sounded like something I would pay money to hear. Then I think that it's good. And I think that one of the best things that I've gotten good at is understanding that the more I know about the music I'm playing, the better I'm able to serve that music. So, just understanding song form, understanding how songs are built, the more I can clearly understand that, the better I can serve them. And so that's something that I really try to impress upon my students at every level.
So I've talked to Liberty DeVito a lot, and I know that one of the things he does, he would say, I want the lyrics first, because he would get into the song lyrically and build some of his parts around that. Have you ever done that, or do you do that actively with lyrics?
So I think this is a really great conversation. First of all, full disclosure, when I was a kid, I don't know why I didn't know what headphones were, but I didn't have a set of headphones. I had my left speaker and right speaker sitting like this on whatever furniture I had, and I had a record player in my room, and I was listening to 52nd Street and Glass Houses, those two records in particular, and playing those records along with other records like Queen, News of the World, and Bohemian Rhapsody and different things like that. But and then later Rush records and stuff like that. But earliest on, I was listening to Liberty DeVito. And so, I mean, knowing Lib as you do and I do now, to me, I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, talk about starstruck. I mean, I was playing to this guy in my room when I was 13 years old.
Me too.
So having said that, I will mention another really great influential player of our day in a different way, Mr. Todd Zuckerman. And I heard a class that he was doing online I was listening to, and he said the exact same thing that Lib said, which is, I want to hear the story. I want to be part of that. And I go, you know, that's a really understandable perspective. And this was his argument against it. And I agree with Todd wholeheartedly about this. He says, if you're not listening to the lyrics, he says, you're not the storyteller. You're just like the cinematographer or the set designer. And I went, I don't listen to the lyrics. And I agree with you 1,000%. I am the set designer. I am the cinematographer. I don't care whether he got the girl or he didn't, or how he got the girl, or how she, you know, ended up leaving him at the altar. That doesn't affect what I'm doing. I'm the one that's creating the Ozark Blue, you know, look. You know, I'm creating the world that this stuff is built on, okay? So I actually do not listen to the lyrics. And I don't remember lyrics. And I'm not overly concerned with lyrics. I'm concerned with what structurally is happening in that song, whether I'm on the leading edge of that structure or I have to build my parts around an existing structure. I look at music like The Matrix, like when he was saying, you know, I don't even see the numbers falling anymore. I just see, you know, blonde, brunette, redhead walking on the streets of New York City. So he looked past the numbers and could actually see the world that was in the Matrix. When I see like a Nashville number system chart, which is what I use most of the time, I see and hear in my head an entire song, and I'm ready to play that song, and that becomes the world that this song can be built on. You know, whether the love story is happening on Mars, or whether it's happening in a desert, or whether it's happening on a boat in the ocean, I'm creating the boat in the ocean. They're telling the story. So it's my job to create a platform for that story to be told, not to tell the story. I work for the storyteller. I service the storyteller, and I serve the song. I don't misinterpret that I'm the one telling the story. So different perspective.
Right. Cool.
And I think they're both great. And like, I love that there's a lot of things that I disagree with about people that I really respect in the business. Because it just shows you that there's more than one way. I mean, I am as ultra practical as they come in terms of what I want my students to practice, what I would choose to spend less time on. I'm not concerned with working on my open-handed playing. You know, I'm not, you know, I set up my drum set in a certain way to be able to serve the song, not to be able to be a drum set virtuoso. If I was doing that job, I might set up my drums differently. But I set my drums up in a way that that helps me serve the song. You notice as I'm looking at you, for those who can see us, I'm looking straight forward. You notice what's not looking straight forward? My bass drum. My bass drum's over here. Either the bass drum's facing forward or you're facing forward. Both of those things can't be true. So I set my drum set up, throne first, snare second, bass drum third, hi-hat fourth, ride cymbal fifth, then the toms, then the cymbals, and anything else. And that way, the things that I need to keep time on, the snare, the bass drum, the hi-hat, the ride, are all in what I would call priority positions. You know, and so I would encourage anybody to look at their drum set and go, is my drum set helping me accomplish my musical goals? And if it's not, I would do what I did, which is I was 30 years old when I tore my drum set down and rebuilt it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All my young students, I have them sit down in a stool away from the set, and I'm like, look where your feet are. Look where they're sitting naturally. Look where your arms are. You know, because too many of them contort their bodies to this preconceived notion of what the drum set should look like.
Exactly. And I feel like, you know, I don't know if I'll get there, but like I'll just say it out loud, and I've said it to them before. I wish Ludwig would start making their beginner 5 pieces with 2 toms on a stand, virgin bass drum, which has no mount, and then a 4 tom, you know, separate. So that, because this ergonomic setup that I'm doing has gained a lot of traction. And I think that it's a better starting place than the traditional 5-piece, which I think has a lot of problems inherently with it. Because the first one is that it doesn't allow for a good placement of the ride cymbal. It's either going to be way up high above the tom or way over to the right by the 4 tom, neither of which are priority comfortable positions to play the ride. So I think that some of those things have to be thought about differently. And this setup is one thing that I've tried to, you know, promote and bring out to the world. And I've had a little effect, I think, you know, there where people are seeing that, and it's starting to gain some steam.
No, it's great. I'm with you on that. Yep. It should, because since we can make the drum set comfortable, why not make it more comfortable?
Exactly.
Yeah. So talking about students, are you part of the audition process, evaluating kids coming in and all that stuff?
I am not. So I'm an adjunct professor. That may change next year. I may end up going to a lecture position, which basically just means I may be teaching more classes. I started teaching some classes this last year. Aside from just teaching drum set, I actually taught a really super fun class that I'll be teaching again this fall called Career Essentials, where I'm able to talk about the idea of helping these students monetize their abilities so that they can create a stable working environment for themselves so that they're not the starving musician, you know, and really it's just being able to try to learn how to assign value to our skills. And something that was interesting that happened, I know you're very tired of pandemic talk, so I won't do too much pandemic talk, because I'm sure some of your talks went back to that point and you're just like, I've had enough of that. But one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that it very simply put, long story short, Rascal Flatts went away. So I went from having this incredibly stable 20-year paycheck, exactly 20 years to the month, by the way. I was, the last gig I played with Rascal Flatts was March 2020. The first gig I played was March 2000.
Wow.
So I went from having this incredibly stable thing to it's gone. And, you know, it's still not back to the way that it was. So I had to go, okay, all this other stuff that I do, how can I make that a stable career, you know, right now in this really weird, uncertain time? Okay, what can I do? I play recording sessions. I have this studio rig. I was all ready to do it. It wasn't like I picked it up for the pandemic. I already had it. So I have the studio thing. I can play sessions for people. I can continue to teach lessons, even if they're online. Now, I'll tell everybody this because I would want them to know this anyways. If someone wanted to take a lesson with me, and if anyone out there wants to take a lesson with me, please feel free to contact me on Instagram, Jim Riley Music. Just go to my private messages and say, hey, Love to take a lesson with you. Fantastic. It's $100 if you want to take a lesson. I tell you that both as a person who would be charging you, but also I'm telling you what I'm making. When I do a recording session, you might be surprised to know that I also sell, my recording talents for basically $100 to $125 for a song. You go, wow, that's super low. Well, yeah, if I wanted to charge $500, I could get it, but I'd get less clients. So that gives me the right amount of clients where I'm doing the right amount of work that I want to do so that it's keeping me sharp. I've done probably easily, with no exaggeration, well over 700 songs down here in the last 6 years.
Wow.
Well over. So each one of those times is experience. So when I get to play on something that people are actually going to hear, I do this every day. You know what I'm saying? It's not like I'm going, oh gosh, I hope I do well.
Right.
I do well every day. This is what I do. So back to the financials. So this was the model I gave myself. I said, if I do 3 things a day, 6 days a week, 48 weeks a year, pulling out my calculator. So that was 300 times 6 times 48. That's $86,400 a year. So I was like, all right, that's my new base salary. So if I do 3 things a day, 6 days a week, 48 weeks a year, that's, by the way, that's take an entire month off. That's Christmas and Thanksgiving and a vacation and all that other kind of stuff. So the flip side of that is if I wake up one day and I do nothing, and then I wake up the next day and I also do nothing, well, that's a problem, right? I'm not going to make as much money as I said I was going to. That didn't even take into account that I picked up the Belmont gig, which gave me some money there. And there were some other things that were coming up. But so I was like, if I work more, I'll make more. If I work less, I'll make less. But at least I'm giving myself some sort of expectation. And it also gave me a place to finish. I go, you know what? I've done 4 things today. I think that's enough. I taught 2 lessons this morning. I did two things. My kids are home. Let me go hang out with my kids. I've done enough today. Or, I did 1 song today, but I did, 7 lessons on Tuesday. I can afford to only do 1 thing on Thursday.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So
right.
I was averaging things out. And, and so that was how I was able to add stability, even in an area where I'm going, listen, the truth is I don't know where my next $100 is coming from, but I'm going to keep adding them up. And so basically during the pandemic, I really wasn't making any less money than I was making when I was playing with Rascal Flatts. I was just working harder and working differently.
Wow. It's a good philosophy. I like that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And so I do a lot of things. I record, I teach, I write and publish, I produce, with all of that stuff, sometimes I'm doing a lot more live playing. Like right now, I do a lot less live playing, but I'm doing a lot more teaching. I'm doing a lot more producing, so I'm producing a couple things right now I'm super excited about. And so it's not like I'm one of these people, and God love them if that's what they want to do. That I teach 60 students a week, and that's what I do. Well, that's not what I do. I teach more like 10 or 15 students a week. But then I'm recording 6 songs, and I'm teaching, well, not counting the students I teach at Belmont, which I'm teaching almost 20. And then, playing this month and next month, I have a lot of gigs with Gary LeVox. So I can add that into the mix. I'm always doing a lot of different things. So as a result, I'm never getting burnt out on any of it. Yep. I love it all. I love the teaching I'm doing. I love the recording I'm doing. I love the producing I'm doing. I love the live shows. I'm really looking forward to all the live shows I'm going to be playing with Gary coming up. And then the one I have coming up with Generation Radio, which I'm subbing for the great Steve Ferrone, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So this kind of dovetails onto something you said. I've asked some people this. It's a strange question, but if there's one musician that you have not played with that you wish you could play with, either living or not with us anymore, is there a musician or two you're like, gosh, I wish I could play with that one person?
You're going to laugh.
I bet I won't.
You're going to laugh because it's someone that it's someone that our friend Daniel Glass has played with. And that is, if I could do a gig right now that I wasn't doing, I had nothing to do with right now, I'd love to play that Brian Setzer gig.
Oh, yeah.
I would love that gig. And, you know, when I saw Daniel, he was like, oh, yeah, I got fired. I'm like, listen, no gigs last forever, Daniel. Something's going to happen. I didn't get fired from Rascal Flatts, but that doesn't mean it's happening anymore.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's gigs end. And they're going to end because, you know, either the people you're working for quit or die, or they get bored of you and fire you, or you screw up and get yourself fired. You know, there's a million reasons that gigs end, and you can't take any of them too personal, you know? So I'll be like, Daniel, you done a gig I would love to do, you know? Yeah. You know, just because I love that music. I love that kind of rocking, swing, rockabilly kind of thing. You know, I mean, it's right up my alley. I'm like a loud big band drummer, and I'd love to do that gig.
A couple of years ago, I was over Bernie's house, Bernie Dressel's house, and he had some of his awards from those guys. I was like salivating. I'm like, man, to play that music.
And, you know, Bernie's on those records, you know,
killing.
And he just crushing it. You know, you can kind of hear the calfskin heads on some of those tunes. Yeah. And, oh, man, you know, I've never met Bernie, but I'm a huge fan of what he does because I know that he's not just a big band drummer. I mean, he's one of the busiest movie session drummers and inventive drummers in LA. Oh, yeah. And I wish him all the best, just to, you know, as a fan watching.
Oh, yeah. Endless creativity. And what a guy. Let's see. I got two more quick ones for you. How about one of your most unforgettable performances? Is there one or two that you're like, wow?
One of them was something that I willed to happen for a long time, which was, you know, growing up, being a certain age, being in my early 50s, you know, I was in high school watching like the Sunday Bloody Sunday video, you know, U2 playing at Red Rocks. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I would love to play Red Rocks. And, you know, Rascal Flatts became this incredibly, you know, global phenomenon group. And we were playing sold out shows at Staples Center and 4 sold out shows at Madison Garden 4 years in a row, Madison Square Garden, played Wrigley Field, which was incredible. First country act to play Wrigley Field. It was amazing. But one of the venues that I really wanted to play was Red Rocks. Contractually, being a Live Nation artist, and they weren't going to play Red Rocks because it wasn't a Live Nation venue. They were going to play Fiddler's Green in Denver. And we did many times. At some point, I just went, guys, are you going to play your whole career and never play Red Rocks? Because that just seems really silly to me, you know? And I just kind of kept on them for a couple of years. And finally, you know, they said, yeah, we're going to play Red Rocks this year. And I knew as soon as they said we're going to play Red Rocks, I knew they were going to want to film a special. And so we filmed a special at Red Rocks. And as soon as we got done with the special at Red Rocks, I called Rascal Flatts' manager. I said, who's mixing this? They said, I don't know. I said, I want my good friend Sean Neff to mix this. He has juice. He mentioning his name was mentioning someone that was definitely someone that they would consider. So they went, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. You know, the advantage of that for me was that was really, in some silent partner way, kind of making me like the musical executive producer. Because now the whole thing's running through me.
Right.
And so I'm working with Sean and I'm approving mixes, and that I kind of can't wait for the moment where everyone gets to see that special that was on some special, network. I don't remember which one it was that does a lot of concerts and stuff, but I'd love to see that out streaming more. I'd love to see that out on Netflix or something like that, where more people had access to it, because that was truly one of my favorite evenings of music. My parents flew up to see that show. It was a really great sold out show, 10,000 people at Red Rocks. It was pretty unforgettable. One of my favorite standout shows.
Incredible. And I've seen so many performances and shows on film at that venue, and it's just, you can't get any better than that.
Yeah, it's, for those of you who haven't been there, it's startlingly, what's the word I'm looking for?
Steep?
Vertical.
Okay.
Steep is the word. Steep is the word I'm looking for. And so the people, even though there's 10,000 people, they are right on top of you in a way that they are not at some other outdoor amphitheater. Very steep. They're very close to you. And you've just got this amazing, red rock, walls, as tall as skyscrapers on either side of you. And then behind you, for the people that are up in the top rows, they're literally looking at Denver.
Amazing.
It's super awesome.
I'll have to go live sometime. I've only seen it on film.
Yeah, it's really great. Pick one of your favorite bands and go see them there. It's a really great place, to go see a show for sure.
All right, and I got two more for you. I don't know if this is going to be the same answer or not, but I can edit it if it is. One of your proudest moments in the music business. Do you have something that you're like, man, I'm really proud of that thing I was part of?
I mean, just little milestones, I can remember, growing up and watching The Tonight Show and watching, the Late Night with David Letterman. And, some of those moments were pretty crazy. I was like, this is the show I've been watching my whole life. And, now I'm backstage and I'm hearing, Jay Leno say, ladies and gentlemen, Rascal Flatts, or, playing Letterman and having Letterman come out. And I remember he said, what's going on up here, guys? What's going on? And then he walks up to me and he did the classic, are those nice drums? Are those your drums? Have you ever seen the YouTube clip of him doing that?
Yeah, he does it to like everybody, right?
Everybody. And I'm one of those drummers. He did it. And another thing that was really interesting was I was a guest drummer on Late Night with Seth Meyers. So I did a week on Late Night with Seth Meyers. And Late Night, that was David Letterman's first show, Late Night with David Letterman. Mm-hmm. So it's the same show back when he worked for NBC at 30 Rock. So, to get to do that show for a week and to do some of those shows, my first, platinum record playing on my first #1 hit, just different things like that. They're all just, they're milestones, but the thing to remember, to keep in perspective, having my face on the cover of Modern Drummer, being in this really elite group of people who that's happened to. In Nashville, there's only been about 3 or 4 of us that have had our own cover Nashville drummers. It's pretty insane. I was talking about this with Eddie Bayers. We're one of about 4 or 5 people that have been on the cover of Modern Drummer. Those are things you can never plan on. So they're never things that I was like, oh, that's a life goal, because you can't plan on that. And now for these kids growing up, being on the cover of a magazine isn't, quote, a thing. Right?
What's a magazine?
Exactly. They have different things. Right. So not only can you not go, oh, that's a life goal, because by the time you get there, that literally doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Being a rock star didn't exist by the time 2000 rolled around. Mm-hmm. So playing in country music was like the next evolution of rock star living. We were the ones playing the stadiums that the rock stars were playing in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So the point I'll leave you with is that I've never defined my success by any of those things. I've always defined my success by the idea that I get to play music for a living, which is something that I deeply love and enjoy doing. I can support my family doing it. And I say anyone who can play music and support their family or support their lifestyle doing that, they're just as successful as me or anyone else that they've heard of that is some sort of name person with a name thing. That stuff is all really fleeting. For me, it's all about the idea of just being able to do what I love for a living, which is something that I've been able to do now for a very long time. So if I meet someone who's teaching students and playing local gigs and they support themselves and their family playing music, I'm like, they're every bit as successful as me. And we can sit and talk about, our careers as colleagues. And I'm not going to try to big dog them. That's not what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to talk about the commonalities that we have, the struggles of just, being a musician and the rewarding thing of being an educator. Those are all things that we can relate to. And so I love being able to speak to my fellow professional drummers and professional musicians. And that's why I'm here with you today.
Well, I couldn't have written a better ending than that. That was beautiful. So
sounds good.
I appreciate it, Jim. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
For more great in-depth behind-the-scenes interviews like this, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcast, or wherever you tune in for thought-provoking content. And one last thing, if you like what you heard today, please leave a rating or comment under this podcast. I'm Sean J. Kennedy, and this has been another edition of Backstage at the Enharmonic. Thanks for listening.